Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Bar Business Podcast, your ultimate resource for bar owners. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, and in today's episode, I am joined by Emily LaRuffa. Emily is an industry consultant who owns Oracle Hospitality Consulting, and she comes from decades of management experience in New York City over multiple venues. She's done openings. She's done some very high volume venues that I think one of them was over like 20 million a year. Blows my mind. But she definitely has some really solid experience in the New York market. And her most recent job before she made the move to consulting was at Manhattan, which is one of Danny Meyer's places in New York City. We are, full disclosure, friends, and we talk a lot. And so one of the reasons why we're friends is because we both love data and the numbers and all of that. So I will apologize to everyone right now. If we get in an argument over prime cost, just know that the podcast version is 2 hours shorter rather than the argument we had about prime cost a few days ago.
Right.
So
pretty much.
We might get in the weeds a bit. But with that, Emily, why don't I let you introduce yourself and just fill everybody in a little bit more on your background?
Sure. Hi, Chris. Good to see you again. Like you said, we talk all the time. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate being able to hop on a call with you and talk about what we're both passionate about, and debate each other like we always do and just go down our rabbit holes, but not too much because no one wants to sit here for hours and listen to it probably. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I really appreciate it. Quick background of who I am, what I do. I have been in the hospitality industry for over 20 years. I started off as a server, went to bartender, for years, and then went into bar managing, beverage director, bar programs, beverage directors of hotels, management, general manager, DOs. So really just had a career of just learning every single role, worked my way up so that, to the top level, that I could have been at, besides not opening my own place, which was a dream of mine too. But at the same time, I think I've made the right decision, to not do that, as we discuss all the time, what the rates are, of what that looks like. I love what I do, and there are many reasons of why I do love what I do. And now going into the consulting world, I took the last couple of years, and yes, my last venue was over $24 million in 1 year, and 7 event spaces and 2 restaurants and hundreds of employees. And I, with the shutdown, I looked at that and I said, is this what I want to be doing? And so over the last year and a half, since I stepped back from operations, I said, let me take everything that I have done and let's turn it into something that is going to be helpful and utilized and can make more of a difference in this world, in this hospitality industry. I think that is a big thing that, we talk about, of how can we make a difference? And so that's really my background. I've had, just really worked my way up. I've been in everyone's shoes before. And I think that's something that I always have to remember and remind myself and remind others. I know what it feels like, and people just want empathy because it's a very hard business to be in. So yeah, that's my career. And here I am, in a new world.
And, I think it's important to point out, because there's a lot of, there are a lot of folks that do what we do in this business, right? There are a lot of consultants out there,
right?
But we all come from different angles and different backgrounds, right? So for instance, you would probably be very comfortable consulting for someone that did 20 million a year in business.
Right.
I'm not that guy, right? Right. I'm used to smaller bars, independents, where you approach everything from a much more corporate, regulated way of doing things, where I approach everything from more of a cowboy fly by the seat of your pants way of doing things, because the structure you have and the people you have and the support you have when you're doing 24 million is not the same as if you're doing 2.4 million or 1 million or less than 1 million.
Right.
If you're doing less than 1 million, there's nothing, right? It's just you do it all.
We really should have a conversation.
Yeah. So it's nice because it gives you a different angle.
Right.
And I think that's when we have conversations, that's one of the great things about it is we're coming at it from two different places. And something I've said a lot to you and on the podcast both is that, especially when we talk about numbers and accounting and stuff like that, you're not really right or wrong.
Right.
You're just coming from a different place, and prime cost can be whatever you want it to be. Which is, I had a whole podcast episode on that. We've had that conversation, right? It's just a true thing. But to get into a bit of what you do, because you focus in some specific areas.
I do.
One of those being cost control, prime cost, that side of things. And that's where I want to start, because A, that's where you and I will get bogged down the most. But also B, I think that provides a lot of value to the listeners to start to understand perspectives that aren't mine on how we control costs and whatnot.
Of course.
So one of the places that you start, same as me, is with costing menu items. And that is something that most independent bars and restaurants struggle with a lot.
Right.
So I will let you go wherever you want with that.
Okay.
But let's get into costing menu items a little bit.
Okay. Should we set a timer?
That'd be smart.
It would be. So, I mean, you can go a couple different ways when you're talking about costing a menu. I have worked in venues that have been the 1.5 million to the 3 million and all the way up to the 24 million, so I have the wide range of those financials to work within. I have the wide range of a smaller menu and then a larger menu to work within. I have had the just satisfaction of working with certain programs as well. Satisfaction is not really the right word, but the benefit of it, where you're able to put in all of the information, for every single item, whether it's a cocktail menu, whether it's wine, and you can break everything down, and it ties in with your invoices, and it's supposed to be this whole beautiful process that just updates weekly if it works properly, and it continuously updates your costing. And so I have worked with that, but I have also had to do the shorthands, the good old Excel versions. And I have overseen a tiki bar. And if you only imagine what a tiki bar, years ago that I was doing, they don't have 3 ingredients. It is 15 ingredients deep. And it is, these 3 are 1 syrup, and these 3, I'll say, thank you, Brian Miller, for that. Tiki fanatic. And we had to do everything by Excel. So when you say like independent businesses, I can range from one to the other, and I think that's something that is a strength of mine, that I'm able to pivot each way.
For sure. And because you brought up tiki, let's have that conversation real quick. Because you want to talk about the absolute worst situation to be in for costing cocktails. It's a tiki.
Yes.
Right? Because I always like to tell people that cocktails tend to be easier than food, because food, you have multiple components. Cocktails, it's normally 4 things. And your measurements are pretty much always the same. That is absolutely the furthest thing from the truth in the
correct.
So if you had a client, let's say, that had a tiki bar, which I know they're not as popular as they used to be, but let's just go down this thought process for a second. How do you even begin to approach costing that? Because you're talking about the tiniest amounts of 15 ingredients going into one 12-ounce glass.
Yeah. First off, you take the easiest part of being the liquor and do that and put that to the side, because that's simple. Costing liquor is the easiest way that you can possibly go with tiki. All the other 8 ingredients is where it gets tricky, and then, like I was saying before, these 3 syrups equal this syrup, and then these 2 equal this. You have to break down each one individually, which isn't great. But I mean, if you look at it as something as simple as, a simple syrup or a demerara sugar, different things like that, or another type of syrup that maybe has 3 or 4 ingredients. Yeah, you have to go down that path. A tiki bar will absolutely take you a lot more time to do, but it is crucially important, especially because, we could go down this rabbit hole. Garnishes. The garnishes within the tiki world, you have to count every little thing. Not that you shouldn't in general, but when you're putting, 151 quarter ounce, everything adds up, so I have, thank goodness, have gone down that path of having to freehand a tiki menu of over 30 cocktails with 15 ingredients in each. And you do it once, you update, as big changes come along. But it is, just throw some fun in it. Have a little rum while, like while
Right.
you're doing it.
That much accounting definitely gets difficult. But and something you mentioned there that I think deserves a little bit more time on is garnishes, or with tiki, where you're talking about adding all those different juices.
Yeah.
Because to your point, liquor is the easy part. Liquor is what most folks do.
Right.
But I mean, what, a Luxardo cherry costs like 27 cents. So if you have a 20% cost, that means you're adding $1.25 to your price just for the
Right.
cherry.
Right.
And that's not anywhere near the complexity that you can have in some cocktails if you start adding cherries to pineapples to oranges to this to that.
Absolutely.
So what is your approach to figuring out the garnish and juice side? Because that's something not a lot of people talk about, but is impactful.
Absolutely. I mean, going down sustainability is a huge thing. How can you cross-utilize? How can you use every part of every ingredient that you are using? So if you're talking about pineapples and you're making pineapple juice, don't throw everything else out. That's where you can pull your garnishes from. The lemons and limes and the oranges. You can get your twists. You can do your dehydrated garnishes. Whatever it may be, everything should be cross-utilized across the board within your cocktail menu. I mean, that's just like the number one rule within tiki. Otherwise, you're really just doing a disadvantage, to yourself. So I think that's something that is the most powerful benefit that you have, to your menu is cross-utilizing. Once you get into the plastic items and the this and that, that's where it adds up, because it does add up in the straws, whatever you want to use for that, especially in this new world of what we do use. But yeah, I think you need to make sure that you're keeping your margins down. So cross-utilization is the most important piece.
And I think that's something you hear a lot more on the food side than the liquor side.
Right. It's not
But
used
it's
enough
just
on
as
the liquor
important.
side. Exactly. It definitely is not used enough. And so I think that's where bars struggle, that they're not able to keep a 15% cost. There are some drinks that are going over 30% and they're like, oh, this is normal. This is okay. And it's no. There are definitely ways that you can use this to your advantage, not even just tiki, but just in general. Like, how is your menu balancing out? And then obviously when you're looking at your P mixes and what's the best selling, there's strategy behind all of it, that goes into costing. So instead of it just being this straight, here are my ingredients, this is the price, this boom, 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 you have to have everything balancing out, to your benefit. But that also makes sense for the guest in the area and your comp sets. That's also a big thing too.
It is, because none of this works unless it fits in with your concept, unless it fits your guests, and
Of course.
right? None of that matters. But one of the things that you just talked about was PMix, because, and I think that's, when it comes to costing, something a lot of people forget about.
Right.
So what, in your mind, is the value of looking at your PMix when you're costing and pricing items?
It's everything. It's everything. You should be running P mixes every day, and when you're using your software, your POS software now, it is much easier just to get those reports. Those should be reports that are in managers' hands, owners' hands every single day. And yes, you're not changing the choices on your menu based off of that. Maybe more quarterly, you should be doing that. But it is absolutely, you need to be able to look at your PMix to see what is moving, and then to let go of things that aren't moving, because all you're doing is then sitting on inventory, and that's not also good for you. So you want to make sure that your inventory is constantly moving. So your PMix is where it's golden for you to figure out. It gives you the answers, is really what I'm trying to say. It tells you exactly what you should be doing, because we can, as an owner, we can like what we like, but if guests aren't buying it, then what do we have at the end of the day? That's not helping anything. It's not helping our top line. Our guests ratio, it's going down, so there is a fine balance to that as well.
The other thing here too is that, and we've had this conversation a lot when you talk about the relation between pricing, costing, PMix, and prime cost, because everybody wants to focus on prime cost and say, well, your prime cost should be whatever number they pull out, and that number, if your PMix changes,
right,
can change 2 or 3% up or down, and it has your targets actually changed, but if you're not measuring that, you don't know your targets changed.
Exactly.
So along those lines, because this is something I know that I feel like for all of us on kind of the finance end is one of our biggest hurdles
Mhm.
when we're dealing with people, is how do you communicate to folks and what do you do to impress on them that your targets, your P&L targets are all going to change based upon what you sell?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, first off, I approach every single business, whether it's a bar, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a hotel, food and beverage program. It's going to be unique and it's going to, everyone's not going to have, there is no industry standard that we can just say this is the prime cost of that it should be, because there's so many factors that play into that. When you look at your prime cost, first off, your P&L should break everything down. It should, your revenue should be there and that should be very broken down so you can really track everything that's happening, your purchases, and then your labor is obviously separate. We're not talking about that now, but that's where your answers are. And if something is not working, if your percentages are over, then something is wrong with your current menu, with your P mixes. And when you look at your costing, those are your two data points that are just, let me look at my menu costing, my menu pricing, and then my P mixes and what's actually moving. So you need to look at those three elements. But many places that I have encountered don't have that. They just kind of go like, oh, well, the restaurant down the street is going with $15 a cocktail. Let me just go with that because it's just what we should do. But their finances aren't the same as yours. You need to be able to look at, okay, what are we doing? Yes, comp sets are extremely important. You need to do that when you're doing your research about when you are putting new things on the menu or making very large changes within, if you're bringing all your cocktails from $17 to $19, whatever that may look like. And you want to make sure that you're just doing it in a fair way. So can you do anything to bring it down? Can you look at a different purveyor or a vendor or whatever that may look like? And can it be adjusted? So that's something that I really work with my clients one-on-one, because it can go different ways, but it's based upon what their finances are, and so when they say, oh, am I at 60%? Am I at 55%? There isn't an industry standard. We have discussed this. Right. There's no such thing as that. Throw it out the window because every business is different. And so let's find the best prime cost for yours and with your concept and with what you're currently doing. And then let's optimize all of the factors that play into your prime cost. And let's find what your goal of your prime cost is.
And that's really important because it really is customized. Now, I will say, I saw a post online the other day that I just noticed funny. It was a guy that owned a bar with some folks. They just opened a few months ago. And he was wondering why they weren't making money because their food cost was 61%, because they based their prices on being a couple dollars cheaper than the guys down the street. But the thing there is, the reason why I mentioned that is because that is the crazy example of what you just mentioned, right? When you're not looking at your data and you're just costing based on what you think people want to pay or what the guy down the street pays. And if every business is different, none of that matters.
Exactly. And you don't want to base your business just based off of what's happening around you. If you have an incredible concept and you're passionate about what you do and the product that you're putting out there is amazing and it's what guests are coming to you for, the product and then the hospitality, those are the two most important pieces. So with that, it's going to be different. And you definitely cannot look at and just go a few dollars less. Can you maybe say, okay, I want to be a little bit less than industry standard? Okay, understand. Let's look at the comp set. But that's not going to be the deciding factor. It's going to be what you currently have. What you're sitting on for inventory is extremely important, because you can't have anything that's just sitting for 2 years and not being used. That's just holding and weighing you down, because that's just where your cogs are going to get thrown off. That's definitely an important piece. And I just want to start by giving a hug, to someone that made decisions maybe that way, and let them know that we can make better decisions. And I'm going to be here every step of the way, and also teach them how to do it so that, they don't have to go down that rabbit hole and make that mistake again.
Part of prime costing, you had mentioned it, so let's go ahead and jump into that conversation, is labor. And on one hand, labor is a little bit simpler part of prime cost than the food because you don't have to do all these individual costing.
Right.
You're not worried about how much salt costs
Correct.
that you put on your burger, right?
Right.
So
Right.
labor is simpler in that. But really, controlling labor cost is way harder because it's not math, it's people.
Exactly.
So how do you approach controlling labor costs? Because that's the hardest part of prime cost to figure out.
Absolutely. I mean, there are many factors that go into it. How I take my first steps into it is, okay, what are your business hours? Okay, let's run the numbers hour by hour. Let's then run our labor numbers. Because if you're opening during a certain time or you're staying open later and you're not making any money, all you're doing is just throwing money down the drain based on, towards labor. And so are you able to make business decisions, high level business decisions that will benefit your prime cost? So I think that's an extremely important place to start because that's one large aspect. And then it's going into, and also you're not dealing with multiple people, 10, 15, hundreds, however many employees you have that now you're changing their schedules, their livelihoods, their income. So you want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence by looking at your current business, what the model is, and what makes sense. It doesn't make sense to stay open, paying electricity and this and that overtime if you're not making money, if it's not working. That's not a smart business decision. 5 days versus 7 days a week. That's a huge debate as well. Whether it's in New York, opening for lunch and dinner, now you need 3 teams, in order to not have to go into multiple doubles, in order to not go into overtime and spread of hours. There's so many different factors when you make a large business decision like that come into play when it comes to labor. So that's the first part that I start with is, okay, because this can be a conversation just with senior leadership, ownership, and me,
Right.
based off of that. Then it's going into the hourly employees, obviously, because that's where everything adds up. And you normally start with, okay, what does your OT look like? What do your spread of hours look like? Now let's look at the scheduling. And I think the most important piece that businesses that leaders don't take advantage of, and whether it's because they just want to hold the information for themselves, whatever it may be, is training your management team, training your service managers, your AGM, whoever it may be, your beverage director, training them to understand the finances of their labor so that they feel accountable for it as well. If they see that they are scheduling and you're just letting them go and letting them schedule however they see fit, then, and they don't understand the finances, you can't hold them accountable for something they don't know. So it's extremely important that you train your management team to understand what it means of scheduling for doubles, what it means, and you have to factor in the breaks and this, like there's so many different things you have to do with that. And then what does it mean for overtime, and spread of hours? And are you then, that goes into another whole conversation. Are you then working your employees to the bone and draining them? Is that also a factor? That then plays into the culture piece. So it's all these, concepts all tie in together and are all extremely important. They all matter. And so my big thing is training management to understand what their labor financials are. And if that means starting, if a company does use a scheduling app, it does the math for you, so you can see that. And then they can make changes, and then it's also not even just how they schedule, but then how they're operating on a day-to-day basis, how they're making their cuts. What does that look like? And so that's also a factor that if you don't train your management team to do that properly, you can't get mad at them. You can't say you're not doing your job properly if you haven't laid out the information and you haven't trained them properly and you haven't given them the tools to succeed. So those are the two big pieces. Sorry, I know that was probably a long-winded answer.
No,
but
it's a perfect answer. But I think one of the things too in there is you have to train your management folks on the financials.
Right.
But that also means that you have to give them access to the financials, right? Because I feel like a lot of small businesses, especially ones that aren't doing great, the owners don't, it's an ego thing. They don't want to admit to their team, hey, we're not really making money.
Right.
And on one hand, I understand that because if you tell everyone that works for you, hey, I'm not making money, they might go find another job.
Yeah.
On the other hand, your managers cannot improve a number they don't see. So with that being true, how do you go about convincing people to share that data that they're embarrassed or afraid to share with other people in their business?
My main approach to that is empowerment. Empowerment leads to loyalty. And then loyalty, then you can incentivize from there. I look at every manager of where they're going to be in a year. How do I get them to the next level? What does that look like? If I'm not teaching them everything I know, then I'm not doing my job properly. As a leader, when I was in operations, that means I can't step away from the business and trust that it's going to be run properly. And as an owner, you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to trust that your management team understands the business inside and out. And I get it. They may not want to share the finances because it may not look great. But if you come to them and you say, all right, I'm going to teach you how this works, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can make a difference because I trust you and because I want you to be a part of the change. I believe in you and I know that you can handle all of this. Now, let me go down that path to show you everything, to show you what prime cost is. Management doesn't understand. They don't even hear that term. They don't even know what controllables are. They're just purchasing disposables left and right and just linen, not making adjustments because you don't teach them that. So I look at it like, okay, let's train the management to understand the finances because they are going to feel completely empowered knowing that they're making a difference. Then they're going to inspire the employees of, great, okay, let me see what the guest average check was. How can we get that better? And then it trickles down. Then you're going down to the employees. And then the employees are obviously going to, step it up because they're being inspired and led, not managed, but led by their leaders. And at the end of the day, that's only going to benefit you as an owner. That's what I truly think. And I think that is a big place that is missing in our industry is not training the leadership team, the management team properly, or whether it's your head bartender, even if you have supervisors, let them in on this information. And then another piece on top of it is make sure you incentivize them. Yes, you're learning this information. You are going to be able to build your career based off of knowing this. I'm teaching you what I know as a director or as a GM so that one day you can be in my shoes because I believe in you. But if I don't teach it to you, how are you ever going to get here? So what does that look like? They want to see the path of growth. They want to know that they're believed in. They want to know that they're trusted and empowered and then held accountable. That's the big thing, that comes with it is if they understand, you can hold them accountable. You can't hold them accountable 100%. If they don't know. So that's really what it comes down to. So how are you going to incentivize them? Is it through bonuses? Is it through profit sharing? What is that going to look like? So I think that's a very important piece that you will see your numbers jump up so quickly once you put the time and energy into your leadership team, the way that they want to be in it. They want to be taken care of. They want to learn. They're eager. They yearn for it because we know this. It's much easier to take a frontline job, to bartend, just, leave, work a great 8-hour shift, make your money, go home, and you don't get a single email. You just show up the next day. That's a lot easier than being a restaurant or a bar manager where it's constant. It is, the fire alarm goes off at 2 a.m. I'm getting a phone call, as an operations. Yeah. There isn't that. So I think that's an important part of it.
For sure. And the worst part about that is that the bartender often is making more than the manager and the owner. I hate to say it that way, but I owned a bar. No, it took me 5 years of owning a bar to make more than one of my servers.
Right.
That was just how that worked.
Yeah.
It's true. And it's very true. It's all right.
And so how can you incentivize the managers to be okay with that? Because they do payroll. They see how much everyone's making. How do you get them inspired to want to be in the role that they're in and grow within that and help grow others as well? So I think that's your job as a leader. And by letting them in, that's how they're going to feel empowered and be able to grow the business.
And I know another fear that people have about training managers to that level is they say, well, I'm going to put all this time and effort in them, and then they're going to go somewhere else because somebody else will be able to offer them a better job than I have, especially if you're an independent, right? If you're an independent working at a bar that I own that did 1.5 million, and you're GM, okay, now you can go work for a bigger company where there's more upward mobility. In my mind, at least, though, if you can train people and send them out into the world and they're successful, that just means you did a really good job.
Exactly.
And your problem is you didn't develop a bench.
Correct. It's a win. It's a win. That's what I want. I never want to hold someone back. As much as I don't want to lose someone, and no one wants to lose that amazing AGM and taking a job as a GM somewhere else. But why are you doing what you do? It's you want them to do that because they're going to go off and they're going to teach other people to do it. And at the end of the day, again, that's what I loved about operations. Yes, I love the food and beverage and the guests experience. Of course, I loved all that. But my biggest passion was helping people grow. And so if you hold that back from them and you hold their career back, you're just doing a disservice. And again, it means you didn't do your job, so great. You have taught this person to do it. Now duplicate that, and that's a big thing of what I do is, okay, I'm going to teach the ownership. I'm going to, coach and work with and guide the senior leadership, make sure they understand this so that then they can delegate. And then we could go down a rabbit hole of delegation. Delegation is the most important thing, as we know. So they will start to teach other people. So even before they go, or if they we hire someone else to take their spot, then they can teach them. And you can continue doing what you do, focusing on the higher level of the business, and they can train that person. But what I do also hope too is that when you empower someone, there's a loyalty that happens, and they care, and they become your friend, whatever it may be. We talk about this as a restaurant family, and so I think that's also an important piece is to keep that open line of communication of what do you need? How can if you're helping me improve my business, let me make sure that you are growing financially as well. Are you receiving time off? Are you receiving health benefits? Many small business owners don't do that, so how can you incentivize your leadership team to also stay with you? Are you then going to open up another place and here's your promotion? I'm going to let you open it up. So what does that look like? And I think there are many different answers of having conversations, honest conversations of what is important to them. I've never had a manager leave without me knowing that they were leaving. They never handed in their resignation without me understanding and knowing that it was coming, because we always had conversations about it. And there have been times that I've said, I'm not able to provide what you're looking for. I'm giving you this blessing and let me help you. That's the biggest thing that I can do, and so it's also okay doing that too. Then what's next? So I think what we need to do is, instead of staying in a scarcity mindset about losing everyone, because we can think about it as employees or managers, is how can we make the best experience for everyone that works for you so that they can grow. And whether it's with you or whether it's with another company, restaurant, bar, whatever it may be, that they can take that and teach other people. So don't live in a scarcity mindset. That's my biggest thing is you will be able to find someone else if you have that reputation that you invest in your people.
Well, and that's a lot of folks on the labor side of this business, especially now, and because of everything with COVID and everything else, are driven by this scarcity of labor concept.
Right.
And I think both you and I have seen the same thing across the industry, which is labor is scarce.
Yeah.
For people that don't have a great team experience.
Exactly.
For people that do have a great team experience, labor is not scarce at all.
Correct.
It's they still have stacks of applications from people that are hugely qualified that will come work for them at the drop of a hat.
Absolutely.
So because and that gap is larger now than it used to be pre-COVID, right? It used to be okay, some places were a little bit better. Now you see a huge disparity between the top employers and the lower end employers. So how do you become one of those top employers? What is it that takes you from scarcity of labor to abundance of labor?
Have you ever sat in on an interview with one of your managers? Do you know how they interview? Do you know what they're looking for? What is your culture? Define that. What are you looking for? What are your goals? What are your employees looking for? Are you killing them with the hours that you're scheduling? Are you asking for feedback? There are so many different ways, that you can approach it. So I think you want to have the best culture, and that comes down to your employees and your management team? And how are you giving into both? And I know it sounds like a lot, but if you start one with you as the leader and you provide that to your leadership team, it's their job to provide that to the employees, and that's the most important piece. You will be able to retain employees. They will want to stay with you if they feel empowered. Empowerment equals loyalty. That's what I believe. You provide that voice. You ask someone's opinion. A big thing I would always say is, listen, the management team came up with this idea. We're going to try it. Throw it against the wall. If it sticks and works, great. Just give it 2 weeks. That's all I ask. Any new change, just give it 2 weeks to see if it actually works. If not, let's gather the feedback and let's make a change. I'll be the first to raise my hand and say, I made a mistake. That didn't work. Okay, let's change it. So many leaders are afraid to make changes, but if they're not making those operational changes constantly by receiving feedback, but also having the team trust in them of there are reasons why we're doing this. Trust us. Then we will take the feedback and make the adjustments because you want it to work for everyone. So working on making sure that you provide that to both of those teams is going to increase communication and trust and loyalty because they feel heard. That's a big reason why people leave the restaurant that they're in. It's my manager never listened to me. There wasn't an open door policy. You hear that. You hear no one wanted to hear my concerns. When I came to them with an issue, whether it was a guest issue or another employee issue, they didn't listen to me. It starts with you and how you train your management team and how you empower them to make those decisions, because then that's just, you have to nurture both of those aspects in order to have a great culture.
And so really how you treat your managers becomes how your managers treat your frontline employees. Right. So
Right.
It's all trickle down in it.
Exactly.
Whether you're the owner or if you work for a bigger company and you're the GM or whatever, it all starts at you.
Absolutely.
Now, with that, one of the things that you had brought up was work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
And work-life balance in the restaurant industry is horrendous. And in the bar industry, I would argue it's worse.
I agree.
Because restaurants aren't open till 3 or 4 in the morning.
Correct.
So how do you put people in a position where they can have a work-life balance when you're talking sometimes about, 12-hour shifts that start at 5 and end at 5 in the morning?
Mm-hmm.
And let alone the fact that that's a long shift, but also the hours don't provide for a good work-life balance.
Right.
The work is stressful and hard. So how do you give those folks a work-life balance?
2 ways. The first most important piece is making sure that your employees feel supported. Do they have the tools on a daily basis to succeed? That is one important piece. If you're talking about a bartender, do they have the right tools? Are they, saying they need more bar tools? Are they saying their POS systems are not working? Whatever it may be. That's the first piece that you need to look at is how are you nurturing and taking care of your team by making sure that they are set up for success? That's the first part. And then all the other business decisions come into play. So how are you scheduling them? Are they standing around? I mean, I remember those shifts, Chris, of being there from 5 to 5. You don't mind being there from 5 to 5 when you are making money. So what does that look like? How are you making business decisions for that? Is it dead from 2 to 4 a.m.? New York City is 4 a.m. Is it dead? So does that make sense? Or are your employees standing around going, why are we here? Just let me go. Then they get frustrated and then they get mad at management, so it's, and as an owner, you have to take responsibility for all of that because your business decisions, your high level business decisions affect everyone, so there's not a single employee that is a frontline employee that will not work if they are making the money. With that being said, then how are you scheduling them? Are you scheduling them 7 days a week, which you shouldn't, are you scheduling them 4 days a week? Are you listening to everyone? Are you listening to the request? Obviously you can't I would be crazy to sit here and say, give everyone the schedule that they want. Of course that doesn't, that's impossible.
But you have to be closed every holiday.
Put in place like the lottery, do something fun, creative of like how to work these holidays. But also, is it important to be open on those days? What does that look like? And so that was a big piece with my last operating job was we were closed Christmas Eve and Christmas Day,
Mhm.
and that in and of itself, for people to, there were years that I missed holidays. There were years that I missed huge birthday parties or weddings with family members that I regret to this day not taking off that time. I absolutely regret that, because there was no such thing as work-life balance.
Mhm.
But it has become a demand nowadays. After the last 4 years since the shutdown, people left this industry because of that. They were sick of it. They said, I'd rather just go work a 9 to 5. Yes, it's less money, but at least I have my nighttime and I have this and I have that. Okay, so how can we take all of those factors and pull it into what we do and make a difference? And it's the little things. They obviously know that they're going to be coming in, working long hours, doing what we
Mhm.
do. But how are you supporting them during that time? And then how are you scheduling them during that time? So those are all important pieces. And again, if you train your management to do it properly and to receive the feedback from the employees and give them off 2 days in a row. I'm sorry, there's no reason. Maybe it's every once in a while that they need, you need to break it up, but
Mhm.
work your schedules so that it does work out for your employees that way, especially if they're on the front line and they're on their feet for 12 hours. You have to give that to them. Otherwise you're going to burn them out and then they're going to quit. So you're not setting yourself up for success if you're not making the right business decisions by keeping that in mind. So I think that is an extremely important part for employees that you need. And it's also an important part of management. There was never a time that I ever did not schedule management without a weekend. They always had 2 days off in a row. And I always said, disconnect, turn off your
Mhm.
phone. I'm never going to text you. No one's going to text you. You may get an email. Don't check your email. I would send so many emails back to my managers and be like, stop emailing. It's your day off. Go enjoy yourself. Like, you have to unwind. You have to disconnect. Otherwise, you just get burnt out. And that's what happened to a lot of people. And so we had an opportunity a couple of years ago to look at how can we make that change. A huge part that came into play was bringing technology in, certain systems, certain POS systems, reservation systems, make it so much easier, that the numbers can be run. Everything can be
Mhm.
done a lot easier. If you are doing it with a software program versus Excel, how much time are you saving? That is the most important piece. And so I actually went down, I was in charge of a whole analysis of management and where they were spending their time during, the shutdown, of what that looked
Mhm.
like. And I had to break down how long it took to do Excel scheduling and then how long it took to copy and paste using a scheduling app. What is the difference? So, and all of those minutes added up, and it added up to at least a difference of 15 hours a week. That's huge for a manager. Like,
That's
unbelievable.
enormous.
When you bring in the right technology, that's what it comes down to. So there are, in the technology apps nowadays, there's so many in the field. They're competitive with their prices. They want
For
you.
sure.
They're begging begging for you to work with them. So
Absolutely.
it's definitely doable. It's definitely possible. And it will work to your advantage with your employees, with your management, and then you as an owner knowing what's going on in your business without having to go searching for the information. It's all there for you. Data is what you can make business decisions on. But if you don't have the right data and the analysis and the understanding of it as well, then you're just selling yourself short. Then it's not even worth looking at, okay, what are these numbers if you don't understand where they're coming from?
Absolutely. And three things there, or a few things there. We'll see if I remember all three of them. That struck me that I want to just touch on real quick. One of them being that if tech saves you 15 hours, it's cheap, right? You can't just look at it as an added cost,
Correct.
because now you have a manager freed up for 15 hours that can do things that drive more revenue,
Correct.
and you'll cover that cost in no time.
Exactly. If they're spending more time with their employees and guest facing, that's where your revenue is going to go up. If they're in the
Mhm.
office having to do admin work all day, that's not what their job should be. So
Right.
one thing that I do with one of my programs is I help leaders break down what it is that their expectations for their management team is on a not only admin responsibilities, but a day-to-day basis. And I think that is something that is extremely important And that is something that I struggled with not receiving for years in my roles, as in management roles, of not knowing if I was doing a good job because the expectations were not laid out for me. So there was this
Right.
constant anxiety of, oh gosh, am I doing I know my shift ends at 10. Should I still be here? Like you're not giving permission for them to be able to empower themselves. And so
Mhm.
I have never stepped into an operation that had the system set in place to teach their management team, one, first off, these are your admin responsibilities. First off, is it what you want to do? If you're not a technology person, why am I going to give you updating the menu pricing and the this and the that? Like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to put that on your plate. So that's something that I come in and I do as a consultant is say, let's ask. Have you ever asked them, what do they want to do? What are their goals? What do they like doing? What do they dislike doing? As on an admin basis. And then from there, it's okay, these are the shifts. This is, a 10 a.m. breakfast shift, a 2 p.m., a 3 p.m., and then 4 p.m. closer. This is what the expectation is on a day-to-day basis. You come in at this time, you have from this time to this time to do admin work. You have this time to this time to do admin work. Then you have lineup, then you have break, and then I expect you to be on the floor with your employees and guest facing from this time to this time. Then pull off and then finish up your admin for the last hour of the day. When I implemented this program with my management teams, it provided a sense of relief
Mhm.
to every single person because they said, I didn't know if I was doing the right thing. I was never told. I just thought I had to get it all done. And so I was doing all my admin work on my day off because, of course, you're going to get sidetracked when you come in and a million things are being thrown at you and there's call outs and you need to call people in. That's all going to happen. But if you don't set the expectations of their day to day when they can do their admin work and what your expectations are for them being guest facing, you're selling yourself short. And you are not, I look at it like if I'm laying out the expectations, I'm taking out the micromanaging. I don't want to do it. I've been micromanaged
100%.
before. I do not work well with it. My anxiety is through the roof when I was in micromanaging situations, not knowing if you're ever doing a good enough job. There was never a time when I implemented these programs and I said, hey, we have to talk. That the manager came in or an employee came in and said, okay, let me just have the paper. I know what I did wrong. Like if you have the expectations set and they're going, okay, can you help me? Like I'm really struggling with this. They know where their areas of growth are needed
Mhm.
if you're communicating with them. And so that's an important piece. You lay out the expectations, you're empowering, you're being transparent with them. It's going to only help everyone grow. So again, the long-winded answer, to all of that, but I think it's extremely important to have that set in place. And if they know that you are making changes to make their life easier, they're going to be even more dedicated because they feel like they're being heard.
Well, I think it's a very simple concept, but nobody really ever looks at it because essentially, if you tell your managers what to do and they aren't lazy assholes that are just there to collect a paycheck and not do their job, they will do it, right?
Right, right.
Like it's not any leap. It's just you as ownership or you as upper level management, you have to be able to articulate what the hell you want them to do.
Absolutely.
And
100%.
that
Most
shouldn't
places
be
don't
hard.
have job descriptions. They don't know what they're
Right.
supposed to be doing. They're hired in a role that they're like, okay, cool, I have the title. I don't know what it means, so provide that to them, give them the
Mhm.
tools to succeed and let them fly off, let them flourish. And you're going to feel so proud because they're able to do that because they feel empowered to make those decisions in order for them to grow because they know that they're being supported. And a big piece that I mentioned, is communication. Do you have your 30, 60, 90-day goals set with each of your managers? Do you as the leader know what they are? If you don't, then you're not doing your job. So you can't look at everyone else saying, oh, they're not a good manager, they're not a good employee. If you haven't set the expectations, made everything very transparent, and also know what they want as well. So I would always have weekly or bi-weekly check-ins with management teams. That is something that's extremely important. And then monthly, we would pull in the finances and teach everyone, okay, this is where we struggled. This is where I need us to tighten up. This is what we need to do for this next period. So that they feel a part of it. When someone feels a part of a team, they're going to make different decisions because they care and they're going to lean on one another. And that's something that was the most beautiful thing to be able to watch, that they don't come to me and they lean on each other for the help because they know that they can. There's a different respect level that they end up building within each other, because if it's, oh, they're not doing their job, well, what is their job? So it's, if you lay out what their job is and all of these expectations, then they can support each other, and it doesn't turn into this manager's not pulling their weight on it.
Well, and not to like call people our age out, but we're millennials, and both millennials and Gen Z, at least in my experience, and I'm curious if you've run across this as well, are very much like, tell me what my job is, I will do that. But I'm not going to do things you don't tell me are my job. And I'm not going to just stand around here and look for things to do. Right. The days of, if you're going to lean, you should clean, and that's all you had to say, are gone.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I haven't heard that for a while, but that's always a good one.
Oh, I used to love that, but I employed all people that were older than me, so I could get away with it still.
Yeah. Not nowadays. It's very
No.
different. I mean, again, if you're setting goals with them and if you lay out the expectations, then there isn't a question. If everything is spread out evenly and spread out so that everything is getting covered, then it's all going to get done. And you can hold everyone accountable for it. And then you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about things not being done, because everyone knows exactly what they're supposed to be doing every day of every week. They know exactly what their job, their role is, when they need to check in, what that looks like. And then again, with your weekly check-ins or bi-weekly, if they're struggling a little bit, you talk to them about it and you provide that support of, hey, let's meet at the end of your shift for the first 3 days so that I can see how I can help you. And you can provide the feedback of where you're struggling. And then I can provide the feedback of how to help you get there. But I'm going to listen to you, because I'm not just going to set up these expectations and just say, good luck. That doesn't work either. That's not being a leader. That's being a dictator. You can't just do that. You have to you have to lead by example. So I think that's something, sure, we can blame it on the generation, but at the same time, if you have the right people that you are nurturing and caring for, and that they feel empowered and loyal to, you're not going to run into those issues. And then you won't have to say it. That's how I look at it. And I know it sounds easy. It's not easy. It's the most difficult thing, because you and I have talked about this. The easy thing is the data, are the numbers. Like, you can make those changes. People is where it's the most difficult part. And it is a full-time job to nurture and to learn how to communicate and learn how to have all of these conversations, whether they're difficult, whether they're easy, whether they're, hoorah, getting everyone going. You need to know all of that, and you need to just be committed to it, is what I think. So it is possible, but it starts with you from the top.
And I think that's because that's come up a few times in this conversation, right? It all starts from the top.
It does.
And one of the things that, kind of going back a little bit, but that I think we need to highlight when we're talking about it all comes from the top, is when you're saying your managers, they need time off, they need time away. And I think for a lot of like the smaller independents, that's hard to do, because as the owner, you're never off, you're never away. You are working from, oh God, I mean, I don't know that there was an hour in 7 years of owning a bar. I don't know that there was an hour of the day or a day of the week that I had not received multiple phone calls throughout the year. Right? Because it was, my phone rang if anything happened. And if it was 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. or Sunday or a holiday, it didn't matter. But as an owner, you can't expect your employees to be the same way.
Of course you can. As much as that sounds great, as much as we would love that, that's not reality, And so I look at it like, okay, what can you implement? First off, how many managers? Someone who has a smaller team, if it's you and two other, you're the owner and you have two managers, working with a smaller team. Okay, maybe you need to step in for a week to give them a week off. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's an incentive. I will jump in your shoes. I will do it because I know how to do it and I'm okay with doing your job. I've been there, I've done it, and I don't have an ego to be able to say, let me take over for you so you can go away and get married. Do you know the amount of people that couldn't take a honeymoon in this industry because they weren't given the
Yeah.
time off? Like, come on, that's crazy. So we need to be more supportive across the board, in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So because otherwise people aren't going to stay, and they need that. They need to disconnect and recharge like we all do. It starts with the 2 days off in a row. It starts with their weekend, so I think that's extremely important for everyone to be able to step back and have that time off. And again, a thing that I struggled with, and you just said it, is your phone's going off 24/7. The amount of times I I would always preach, okay, don't respond on your day off. Uh, I had to stop myself many times from sending emails at 2 o'clock in the morning and I would just put them in my outbox. And I said, okay, this isn't good. This isn't going to be received well. If I'm telling everyone I'm preaching to take the time off, if I'm sitting here responding at 2 a.m., that's not beneficial because then they look at it like, oh, I need to be doing that then on my time off because she's doing it. So that's something that you have to change your mindset and just manage your time better. Manage your time, manage your the expectations, the day to day, and structure everything differently. So that's what I do is I come in and I help figure all that out. And it's not the exact same for every single place. Every place is different and every place has a different manager, and it's not even just about how many managers, but they have every person is different. So you have to tip things and make things work for everyone. So every single place is different. And that's where what I love, is it's fun for me, to be able to say, okay, we're working with different personalities, and different goals and things like that. So that's an important part but do you know that as an owner, as a leader? Do you
Right.
understand that? That's where it starts. And if you don't, then you have to start there.
Well, and that also ties back to kind of the beginning of our conversation because every place is different.
Right.
And I don't care if you're talking about employee management, if you're talking about how to motivate your leadership, if you're talking about, your P&L and your prime cost. Every place is different. And I know I've said this about this podcast before, but we try to offer a lot of varied perspectives and offer and say, here are some industry averages.
And then,
but not everything works for everybody.
right.
And if you aren't focused on, if you come into this business too rigid, you will fail.
Oh, yeah.
You have to understand where the guidelines are and the guardrails are and where, there's some things like serving meat off the floor, right? You just can't do that.
Correct.
But short of things like that are just blatantly health violations and illegal.
Right.
It's not like every place has to be the same or everyone has to do the same or think the same.
I agree completely. Yeah, and that's the beauty, of what we do, that we're able to help everyone realize what it is that they have and work within that. I'm not looking to bring in the same to every single business because that's just not doable. I never went from every business in my career. There wasn't a single place that was the same.
Right.
I had to constantly, and trust me, I'm a very type A, OCD. So I struggled finding the gray area. I still do. It's something I have to constantly remind myself of. It's okay to be in the gray area. It's more fun to be in that area. If this industry was black and white, we probably wouldn't be in it. Most of the people wouldn't be in it.
Probably not.
We choose this really hard industry for gosh knows what reasons, but we have to find the gray area.
I mean, I'll tell you, because I went from hospitality to bookkeeping, accounting type work. Now I'm back. And that is the sole reason, because there is gray space in accounting and bookkeeping, let's be honest. But it's not as much fun as ours because it's just like, well, I can move this number 2 lines.
Right.
And being stuck in just numbers all day long, as much as I love them, is not fun compared to dealing with people and all the variables involved in our industry and the impact you can have.
Of course. Absolutely.
Right? Because we have a unique opportunity to help a lot of people start their careers.
Correct.
Because, almost everybody, most employees in this business start as college students, right? Or high school students.
Of course.
And so we can help people grow their careers. We can help them gain skills that'll be with them through their whole lives. We can help them with a lot of complex problem solving and dealing with situations that in no other industry you come across.
Right.
Right. And that's have one mad customer at you when you're 15 and you learn that lesson.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's just a wonderful thing. And it's the approach you take to the employee side and the management side and really developing them is something a lot of people talk about, but a lot of people try to make it too rigid.
Right. And you can't. I mean, we've all worked for those managers that live in the black and white and are the micromanagers. It's not working out. They're not in that role anymore. That place may not be open anymore. And it's because of that. It's because they didn't invest and they didn't find the gray area, and again, I struggle with it, but it's what I find is where the creativity comes from, where the storytelling comes from. And so that's what inspires me every single day, that I love living in this area because of that.
For sure. And we've been talking for a while now, so we kind of got to wrap it up. But I warned everybody before we started that we would go down rabbit holes and end up in weird spots. So we delivered on that promise,
we struggle
right?
to keep going back down.
But we set expectations, we hit the expectations, right? Perfect experience.
Exactly.
So,
and my earphone just came out, of course. Hold on.
Yeah, that'll happen.
I'm Italian. I get a little excited.
It happens. But with that, because we are getting towards the end, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on that we have not had the opportunity to bring up yet?
One area that we definitely have not touched on that I think is also extremely important is guest feedback. We've touched on everything within the business. So we've touched on the employees and the management and the culture and the numbers and the prime cost, all of those pieces. But you don't have a restaurant or a bar or a hotel if you don't have guests coming in every single day. It's where it comes from. So what does that look like? And so something that I think is crucial to your business is the information that you receive from your guests. It's guest feedback. Are you tracking it? What are you doing? Guest recovery, the amount of loyal customers, guests that I have had over the years had some difficulty. We're a guest recovery. They turn into loyal guests for years. They're the ones that are going to sit at bar seat 14 every single night at 5 p.m. But it didn't start with them just being the happiest person, or them being happy with every single thing that they encountered. And so something that is extremely important to your business are NPS programs. Like, what does that look like? And again, we can go down this rabbit hole. If you're going 0 to 10 to make it simple, who are the people that are going around spreading word of mouth? I can tell you in my experiences, I remember places that I have gone to that I did not have the best experience, but it was how the employee, how the server, the captain, the bartender fixed the situation, how the manager followed up with the situation and made it into a great experience. That, at the end of the day, is why I continue going back to that restaurant or that bar and became a regular there, because of that, because I saw how much the employee and the manager cared to make me feel heard and my concerns feel heard and make the changes for it. And again, I will also preface this, but and you're probably the same way. We are the last people to speak up when something is wrong because we never want to be that person. My best and loyal guests for over the years were always someone that spoke up because they cared. If a guest is speaking up, it means that they care. And so if you are not tracking that feedback, you're selling yourself short. You're not learning where you need to make the changes, where you are making mistakes. You're not learning if you're not training your employees properly, if your leaders, if your managers aren't interacting. Your guests are going to tell you everything that you need to know. So are you tracking it? Who is tracking it? Who is reaching out to the guests? What does that guest recovery look like? So that's an extremely important part that I tie in within the prime cost conversation, because if you don't nurture your NPS program, then at the end of the day, your top line revenue is going to suffer. So it's
Absolutely.
hand in hand, all the finances, but where the finances are coming from, where the guests are spending the money on is the most important part that goes into it. If you don't have guests, you don't have revenue. And so you need to hear them, and then you need to teach your team. And a big part is you need to empower them, set the guidelines of what they can do so that they don't have to call the owner saying, is this okay if I do this for this guest? Like, what does that look like? Do you have programs in place, mini martini shots or whatever it may be, or, something food wise, like something you follow up with that is set as a guest recovery, waiting for a table, are you greeting them with just, a glass of champagne? What does that look like? That's what they're going to remember. They're going to hear, I'm sorry, we've made a mistake. People want honesty. If you say, oh yeah, your table, it's coming up in 10 minutes and it's going to be 45 minutes, you're selling yourself short. So don't allow your employees and your managers to live in a scarcity factor with it. Allow them to feel empowered to make a change. And that's where it all comes from. So I think that's one important piece that we haven't touched on. And we can go down NPS for hours again, but that's something that's crucially important in the business as well.
It is. And rather than subject everyone listening to that whole 2-hour conversation that you and I have had before, I'm just going to let them go for the day. So just to wrap up, Emily, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
It's been a very fun conversation.
Always.
And I know we've hit on some things that are different in the way that we're talking more about that employee experience and how that, not just how to have a great employee experience, but why a great employee experience affects your guest experience. It affects your numbers. It affects your ability as an owner to have life.
Of course. It's a complete circle.
It is. It is. And how you treat people is how they treat you. So again, thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
Really appreciated your time.
Thank you.
It has been fun for sure. So with that, everybody, that's going to wrap us up for today. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you like, subscribe, leave a review, share this with your friends. If you want to learn more and interact with other bar owners, join Bar Business Nation on Facebook. That's our Facebook group where we're building a community of bar owners all together to support each other and be able to rely on each other and have people to bounce things off of that actually have some concept of what it is to be a bar owner and can give some advice that means something. And as always, everybody, I just hope you have a great day and we will talk again later.